Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is December 8th, 2020, 10 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It is being audio and video recorded, and it will be placed on Channel 9 replay. And with that, I ask that everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you for joining us, Mr. Pilling. The first item that we are going to discuss is the reopening of Old Town Hall, specifically for meetings. So I know you had touched on this during public input at our Board of Selectmen's meeting last week, Mr. Pilling, but did you have anything else you wanted to remark? And I should caveat this by saying Police Chief McDonald wasn't able to join us today. I did just very casually speak to him about reopening Old Town Hall meeting room for the specifically for meetings, for smaller meetings, and he had no issue with that. So I did just want to pass that along as well. Mr. Pilling?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I believe it's important that we have small meetings in there. So we're talking maybe 10 people or less. Right before we closed it, the capacity was 14. Seemed to work out pretty well. We have to remember that there's also one cable employee in the room when we're doing these meetings. I think the meeting's more productive. Part of the discussion we had last week when I brought this up was that, well, Thanksgiving, and there was going to be a surge from Thanksgiving. Well, we're now, about a week and a half past it, and we never saw a surge. The numbers stayed about the same, like 5 to 7 cases a day. And that stayed consistent right on through. So, and people we were talking to, only a couple of them were family gatherings. So that surge that we expected never came, which is great. It's great news because Dighton has been struggling for a while with our numbers, but they seem to be falling back more into line with what they were, before. So we're going in the right direction again.
And I know you, excuse me, my apologies. I know we had discussed this very briefly at the last meeting. We look at the reports, and Todd, we're in constant contact. The numbers are going up because that's what numbers do. Like you can't erase a COVID-19 case. Once it happens, it exists, right? So we know the numbers will go up, but I have noticed that they are increasing at a much lesser rate, just tracking like week to week. And so we should mention that as well, which you did briefly touch upon. So did you have anything else specifically? And I guess let me ask one question about this. Why are we choosing 10, Mr. Pilling? And I guess my other question for you is, if we do go with 10, the Board of Selectmen had planned to have a meeting, obviously, on the 16th. Let's say theoretically we did have it in the Old Town Hall meeting room. Would the Board of Selectmen be allowed to invite members, I think it's 4 or 5 members of the police department for a certificate of recognition?
Well, the number 8 or 10, it was somewhat random, but we talked about this with a couple different people, but like Board of Health is 3 plus the administrator and myself is 5, and cable is 6. Mm-hmm. Conservation Commission's the 5 members plus cable is 6, so they could have a couple people from the public come into the meetings. Selectmen, you're talking 3 plus Karen is 4 plus cable is 5. So yeah, you could have 4 or 5 people come in if we use 10 as the number. People could still participate remotely by hybrid because there is a large screen TV up there that they could be put up on and that kind of thing. So you could go with 12. I was just using a smaller number to be a little bit safer. So.
Thank you.
Todd?
Do other members have questions? Selectman Goulart?
Todd, what Brett's talking about, is the number based on them staying? Because this group would come in, be recognized, get their certificates and leave. They might not even be present 10 minutes. we could schedule it that they would come in and we could just do this and they'd leave. So
Yes.
it's not like they're going to be
Right.
6 hours of a meeting.
Right, so the capacity of the room, say, would be like 10 or 12, but, right, so when they come in and they leave, then 4 other people could come in, so.
Understood.
Chairman,
Yes,
this is
Selectman
Mr.
Pacheco?
Yes, Todd, and you're saying that they're coming out with numbers that are random. It doesn't sound like it's very scientific. You said 8, 10, possibly 12. We are in the red zone. I don't think that this is the time for us to let up on this, as I expressed last week. Dr. Burke said this past Sunday, we're not going to see the results of Thanksgiving gatherings for about another week. Dr. Fauci said the same thing yesterday, so I think it's a little premature. And we're now getting into other holidays that are coming up. We need to set an example for our residents. We want to show them that we asking them to be very careful. I didn't get together with my family for Thanksgiving. I haven't traveled out of state since this whole pandemic started. I can't hug my grandchildren. I want to set an example for the town. I think if we're going to start letting things go, I think it's a big mistake. The state of Massachusetts is considering a 3rd field hospital for the South Coast, which is our area. All the surrounding towns around us are in the red zone. Taunton, Freetown, Westport, Somerset, Swansea, Rehoboth, Berkeley. People are getting a little, maybe letting up a little bit because there's going to be a vaccine. Vaccines aren't any good unless there's vaccinations. If people don't take the vaccines, it's not going to be helpful for us. So I think it's a big, big mistake to open up the town hall. We're giving the wrong message to our residents. People don't want to wear masks because they think it's political, that they're losing their freedom. People don't want to take vaccines because they think it's the government trying to control their minds. I think we have to be united. We have to convince the public, our residents of our town, how serious this is. And we just need to be careful. I don't think it's worth getting together 8, 10 people in a room, risking people, our employees, our colleagues, life, and their family members' life. So quite frankly, I am totally opposed to this. Maybe in March or the end of February, we can revisit this, but raise your hand if you think numbers are going to go down in the next few weeks, because I don't think anybody here believes that the numbers are going to go down. They're going up, and it's getting worse and worse. Since November 1st to December 1st, hospitalizations have tripled. Think of all the poor medical workers that we're sitting here just talking, but they're going in working 8, 10, 12 hours a day with a mask on and a shield on. I visited my mother yesterday in the nursing home. All the employees had to have a mask on and had a shield on. I couldn't hug my mother. We're trying to be careful, and I just think we're giving the wrong message to the public. So I am totally opposed to opening up town hall at this time.
Mr. Chairman, this is Mr. Gale. Can I speak or not yet?
I was just going to add something to that, Mr. Gale, and then can we go to you real
Go ahead.
quick?
Go.
Thank you, sir. I agree with you, Selectman Pacheco. You stated facts. I understand, just being the chair, being on the pandemic task force, I understand that there is an eagerness to reopen the old town hall meeting room for meetings. There are committees that have people in town, and I didn't, I guess, realize this beforehand, who don't have computers, don't have internet. I know that's not our concern. Our concern is safety. I agree with you. I'm gonna agree that we should keep it closed for now. And I'm okay that if the Board of Selectmen wants to take a vote on this, that's fine. We can, quote unquote, take the heat if there is any heat for keeping that room closed. But Selectman Pacheco, I did appreciate you gathering a lot of that data and facts and presenting that here. So it was very persuasive for me, and it was very informative for me. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I think what we could do, if the board is amenable, I'm just giving my personal opinion. We could take this reopening question for meetings, maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And I don't mean we discuss it every week. I mean, maybe what we could do is meet with our health agent, Mr. Pilling, reassess the numbers, assess the situation. And when we feel comfortable, then we can reopen it for meetings. But I don't want to make a blanket vote and just say, let's keep it closed till March, because I really don't know what's going to happen. Selectman Goulart, yep. And then Mr. Gale.
Earlier that, on the 16th, I've got 2 public hearings posted. The Stormwater Committee.
Mhm.
The Stormwater Committee has continued to meet throughout this pandemic safely. We've used both in person and we've used video
Mhm.
combinations. I certainly want to move ahead with those 2 hearings. They're both solar farms. They're both, one is the Brook Street one, which is very close. Let me put it that way. The other thing is, after we have a public hearing, we have site visits to make, and then a decision's made. If we don't have those meetings as posted, those projects are going to be delayed. One of them may be anyhow, but the main one that's moving ahead, I don't want to delay them. I still want to have the Stormwater Committee meeting and let every member of the committee know you have an option. And the other thing is, I will ask Roz to contact whoever's going to attend representing those
Sure.
solar farms.
Yep.
They have an option, and if they show up in person, we're limited to 2 people coming into that building at a time, which means if the second party arrives, they're going to have to wait outside because they're not going to come in while we have, if we have 2 in there from the other company. So I'm more concerned about going ahead with that stormwater meeting on the morning. I think it's that important. I understand what Ken's saying, but I also think that if we move carefully, just like we have with people working at town hall, providing services, we don't open up and everybody and their grandmother shows up, and we give everybody an option. You've got video or you've got in person. So I want to move ahead with that stormwater meeting. It's already been in the paper.
So
I
that, yeah,
I have a
ZBA and planning do their hearings over the internet, and they haven't skipped a beat. And I'm thinking any site visit, I would assume a lot of those would be outside because you're dealing with stormwater.
Right.
I have no issue with an outside, everybody's masked up, spaced out outside. I have zero issue with that. I understand site visits. I was on the ZBA. We had a lot. Selectman Pacheco, you were on it too. We went out, we visited solar farms with Roz, ironically enough, when she was the ZBA office manager. Nope, we understand business has to continue. And if the board votes to not reopen the Old Town Hall meeting room, Selectman Goulart, I'm happy to work with you on figuring out how we can make the hearing happen. Selectman Pacheco?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I don't understand why Mrs. Goulart scheduled that public meeting in Old Town Hall when right now it's been closed and we haven't even taken a vote yet whether or not we're going to open it up. So
Because at the time that meeting came up, we checked with Mr. Pilling. And at the time, the town meeting, he announced that town hall should be closed. And we said, what do we do for the meeting on the 16th? He says, things may change by then. Well, I think things have changed somewhat. And the fact that we can offer every member of our committee an option, they all don't have to be present. But I still think it's important we move ahead, because prior to that being posted in the paper, the impression I got moving ahead was it looks okay. We're probably going to be able to do it. And the fact that the Stormwater Committee has met using combinations. So that's why we went ahead with it.
And if I may, the public notice that went out to all the abutters in the newspaper, it did state that there would be a remote access allowed for the meeting. So if we switch it to just a Zoom meeting, it's already been told to the neighbors that is an alternative.
Okay, that was kind of my concern, and where I just wanted to make sure everything could still happen. Just a point of clarification. Let's say worst case scenario, the hearing had to be rescheduled, which it doesn't sound like that needs to happen. How much notice is needed? 7 days in the paper?
7 days in the paper and the abutters 7 days, yeah.
Okay, but that's costly, obviously, to notify the abutters. Okay, and not costly, but you know what I mean. It takes time and you gotta send the letters out. Mr. Gale, sir, you've been very patient.
That's not a problem. It's still in the morning. I can be patient in the morning.
No
So,
worries.
I'm speaking with a couple of hats. First of all, I totally, on one level, I completely understand as we all do, the need to have in-person conversation and meetings. They're very often more productive, things move faster. There are a lot of reasons potentially to have an in-person meeting. So if it were any other condition, I would obviously be saying, let's have in-person meetings. I have to state though, however, I'm against it, and I know I don't have a vote here, but the reason I'm against it is there are so many people in the community, first of all, who potentially have disability, or in many cases, pre-existing disabilities or hidden disabilities that they're not even aware of, that are physical disabilities or certain types of ailments or disease that a person may have that they're not even diagnosed with yet, or that they don't really want to recognize, or potentially that they haven't addressed. And I think if you have a public meeting in a public place, number one, you're not only putting those people at a higher level of risk, you're putting other people around them at a higher level of risk. That's something that I think you have to consider. Second to that would be the fact that if I'm very direct, I would say there are 2 members of your own Board of Selectmen who are over 65. And all of the science talks about people who are over 60 potentially being predisposed or potentially being a much more likely candidate to either get COVID or spread COVID. So I think to expose other people who are over 60 or 65 in this case to the virus is self-serving, and I'm being direct and blunt. I think that that's really inappropriate to do that. Further, I would remind you that even if you have meetings there, between different meetings, excuse the phone in the background, there's nothing I can do about that. Even when you have different meetings, that doesn't go to the sanctity of how are you going to clean the room between meetings? How are you going to sanitize it between meetings? Now, they say it's not necessarily always spread if there's virus on furniture or chairs or floor or lavatory or things like that, but it can be, as we know. So again, who's going to come in and sanitize between every one of these meetings if you have one a day or even one every other day? Who's going to have that extra responsibility? And the next thing I would say is, when you talk about the numbers may be moderately steady now, but I'm going to remind every one of you that from March, when this first started, through mid-October, late October, and Todd would know these actual dates better than I, the total number of viruses in the town that were being reported was around 70, 72, 77, something like that. In the past month or 6 weeks, that's more than doubled. And now it's getting over, it may already be over 200. I don't have the actual numbers to debate that you guys have. I think the last number I saw posted was 187, and that was a week or so ago. So it's probably over 200 now. And my point is, in 4 to 6 weeks, the numbers have more than doubled. They've almost tripled. It doesn't make sense logically when you close town hall and all services and all meetings to the public, when you're going on the average of 2 or 3 or 4 cases a week, to suddenly reopen it when you're going to 20 or 25 cases a week. Where's the logic? It makes no sense.
Thank you, Mr. Gale.
So now I have a question.
Sure.
Since there are 3 people in town hall who work relatively close to one another over the age of 60, and there may be more for all I know, what are we going to do about the proximity of people in town hall, especially treasurer, clerk's office, because they're a lot closer
Yeah.
than you would be in a meeting hall? It's all right with me, as long as I can have my meeting, that's okay. But if we're going to follow Mr. Gale's logic, and I think it makes a lot of sense, you got to start taking a look at the closed town hall, because it's not closed. We got employees that are too close together. So that's the second thing.
Yep, this has been a concern that Karen probably, I'm sorry, that Mrs. Brady had apprised me of probably a few weeks ago, to be honest. And what I said was, listen, we don't have a town administrator right now. If you need to sit in that office, count ballots, this is how far ago this was, probably a month ago. If you need to count ballots, track ballots, whatever you need to do to spread out and not be near each other, do it. They've asked to work something like a staggered shift. I don't know if they're doing that. I said, I have no issue with that. We're working on the accountant's office. We see the light at the end of the tunnel there. A lot of work has been done. So we know we're going to clear up that congestion. We just need this temporary solution. So Selectman Goulart, you're 100% correct. Mr. Gale, 100% correct. And those are the two solutions for the congestion in the clerk's treasurer's office. I think they're probably going to lean towards a staggered schedule rather than be in the town administrator's office. Is just my thoughts on that. But that is a good point, and we have considered that and addressed it. Any further questions, comments, concerns on this before I call for a vote? Hearing none, at this point, I will entertain motions regarding the reopening of the old town hall, meeting room for meetings. Hearing no motion, I assume that that means that the old town hall meeting room remains closed for public meetings, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Mr. Pilling, sir, any, shall we, I don't know, shall the Board of Selectmen or on our Facebook page or website, should we release something saying that the old town hall meeting room is going to remain closed for public meetings until further notice?
Yeah, I mean, I believe last time Mrs. Brady sent out something to all the departments to let them know, so they can
Awesome.
let them know it's to remain closed at least through the end of the year, so.
Selectman Goulart, should we have a discussion offline on Zoom information for the stormwater meeting?
Oh, I can do that with Todd. He handles it when we go Zoom.
Awesome. So we're good on that?
I am.
Awesome.
Mr. Pilling, would you just ask Roz to notify those proponents for those solar farms that everything's going to be virtual? And that way they can be prepared to, unless they not show up, if they were planning to come in. And for any review of plans, since we only have one, I think that's probably close to being viable. I'll put it that way. We can review plans when we do a site walk or a site visit. If you know, and it isn't going to be tons of plans. It's going to be similar to what we had on Tremont and Middle, you know, a piece of paper, a rough diagram saying this is where this is and whatever. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Mr. Pilling, thank you for understanding, sir. We appreciate it, as always. Mr. Pilling, we're not off the hook yet. I know, so first of all, I want to congratulate the health department on the grant that they received in excess of $1,300. Do you want to give us a brief, I don't know who saw that email, but did you want to give a brief, you know, highlight to your, to the department's accomplishment, and then we'll discuss what we're here to discuss.
Well, first of all, thank you, but the reason why we got the grant is because the grant went to towns with a % positivity rate over 4%, so it's a bad reason that we got the grant. So the grant money was, there were several expenses that were allowable, COVID-19 testing, contact tracing, enforcement of executive orders and workplace safety standards, and communication about the spread of disease for activities covered by the 4 areas that I just mentioned. So the issue we got is where we were at is our nurse couldn't keep up with the contact tracing. There were too many calls because a lot of town nurses do multiple towns, because in a normal month before COVID, they were dealing with 1 case of tuberculosis or 1 case of smallpox or whatever, you know, whatever it was. It was only a few hours a month. Obviously, with COVID, they couldn't keep up. So what was happening is the number of cases were going to the CTC. The problem is it was taking the CTC up to 14 days to call people to tell them they're in a 14-day quarantine. So it doesn't really do anybody any good. So the office manager and myself reached out November 17th and said, hey, we want to get trained in Maven so we can do this. Just got the approval this morning to do it. That was whatever it was, 20 something days. So we don't have time to train somebody else because this grant, the money has to be spent by December 30th of this year, which also coincides with the CARES grant. That money also has to be spent by that time. So we felt that the best use of the funds would be for overtime for Board of Health staff to do the contact tracing. In fact, right now, we're spending about 8 hours a day making calls to positive contacts, to quarantines, meeting with the schools, businesses. It's been nonstop COVID. And so we felt if we could put more time into doing the contact tracing and follow-up calls with people, we could do better. I will say that as of yesterday, the quarantine rules changed. It's no longer a 14-day quarantine. Now you can do like a 7-day quarantine, a 10-day quarantine, or a 14-day quarantine, depending on your symptoms, your testing, and all this other stuff. So the rules keep changing on us, and it makes it difficult. So we were thinking that the best use would be for office staff to continue to do the tracing so that we can stop people from spreading the disease once they have it.
So I guess my two questions are, my first question, I guess, let me just make a statement. So we want the contact tracing to be done, obviously. That's the way that we help contain the virus. So we understand that. I guess my first question is, okay, the grant can be used for the overtime. I don't dispute that. How do we keep track of when the $1,300 runs out? And then how do we deal with, because you're a non-union employee, so overtime, okay, we understand that. But if there's other staff in there who plan to do overtime contact tracing that are covered under the CBA and a union member, I think we need to think about that a little bit before we just say yes. So those are my two questions. I guess the other one was a concern. Yep, Mr. Pill.
All right, so the first time we got the FEP grant back in March or April, whatever it was, and it was only like $9,000. We tracked it ourselves. Obviously, we were sending our timesheets over to the accounting office, but we were tracking our time. And honestly, since then, we're still tracking because of CARES. So every week we have to figure it out. So this grant, we know how much there is, and we would track it separately. And we would actually put a separate line on our timesheet for this FEP grant so that the accounting department can definitely track it that way. So, but we were tracking it ourselves.
The only thing is so the two people doing the contact tracing are you and the office manager. So that's fine. But my question is, so you both have hours that were approved on a temporary basis up to 40 hours. And some of that's overtime for both of you. And for you, Mr. Pilling, some of it's like base hours, we'll call.
Yes.
So my concern is, if the grant is for $1,300 and the board's going to make a decision on, okay, you can do additional overtime beyond 40 hours with this grant, how many, I don't know, weeks of this can that really go? $1,300 isn't that much money. And then what happens to the beyond 40 hours after that?
So the $1,300 somewhere, it's around 30 hours worth of time for the office staff. But that's 30 hours again across 3 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on when we start this. So it seems to me like it might be as much as 5 hours in a week that we would be doing. I would assume that we'd put a cap on it and we wouldn't go over a certain amount also. But yes, it would be above the 40 hours for both of us at this point in time.
So does this grant?
Selectman Goulart.
Go ahead.
So you've got to spend this money before the end of December, or can you carry anything over? Or it's going to end anyway.
Carrying over.
So
you have to spend it by December 30th.
Okay, so any tracing you're doing or things related to that, you can charge to this, right? Which means you'd be charging, I would hope, more to this and less to the budget account. Budget account meaning, how much can you put on this grant and not spend town money? Because you got to spend the grant, is what I'm saying.
Well, all they said was that they are, we have to use the additional funds for expenses incurred and products and services delivered by December 30th and the allowed expenditures. So I guess technically we could do it for under the 40 hours and separate it that way.
As long as you're working on, I'll say COVID, it would, and you've got to get it spent, then for cost allocation, I would charge more to the grant and less to the budget, because when the grant money's expended, you're gonna go back on the budget anyhow, so we should be
Correct.
spending that money.
So to that point, I just, for the sake of just full transparency, so we had, I believe the office manager did 45 hours this week, or last week, excuse me, and Mr. Pilling did 43. We don't have the grant info, so when the assistant town accountant does the payroll, that's coming out of the overtime line. That's not coming out of the grant, to your point. Not yet anyway, Selectman Goulart. So
Right,
that
and-
hours doesn't come out of the grant.
Okay, but what I'm saying to you is when the costs are actually allocated, I believe you can do a book entry and transfer some of that expense that's being paid out of the budget
Yep.
over to the grant because you want to spend it. I mean, obviously, right now you need a line to charge in order to pay them for the extra
Correct.
work.
Correct. Yep.
When the grant money is here,
Yep.
then I believe it's like we put the money up front for them to do all the extra work.
Yep.
The expenses are justified.
Yep.
And I'm thinking there can be an adjusting entry, taking those expenses out of the
Sure.
budget line and overtime line,
Sure.
putting them in the grant. So that's a question for Chris Laviolette, but I think you can do that.
We can talk to Mr. Laviolette and Mrs. McCarron about that. She did ask me if an account had been created for the grant. So I think going forward, she is expecting once the town accountant creates that account for the grant so we can use the funds, this will be a non-issue. So
Yeah.
hopefully that'll be set up by next week because obviously, Mr. Pilling, we're expecting overtime. We obviously know that there's more contact tracing.
Okay, I've got two questions and it's a combination of Dr. Z and Mr. Pilling.
Yep.
Number one, are we going to do any testing in town? And number two, now that they're talking about vaccine becoming available sometime, hopefully in the new year, are we going to have any kind of a dry run or testing, a test of a test of the system in place? Because I'm on that group that I have to go to the middle school and be part of the team if we're going to be doing, I think it's vaccinations.
Mhm.
I haven't actually attended any training because when they scheduled the last one, which was months and months ago, it was scheduled on a day I wasn't even in town. So I just want to know from a planning standpoint, again, Dr. Z, because I know you've been sitting in, and Mr. Pilling, is there going to be COVID testing in town, number one? And number two, is there a plan for, I'll call it a dry run, if we get vaccine?
All right, so question number one, the schools got some testing. Right now, we don't have any plans to do
Okay.
broad testing of the town.
Okay,
Again, our numbers,
Mhm.
and I understand the total number keeps going up, but I'm talking like the week numbers, they were up to whatever, and now they're coming down. So they are getting better. But if you look at the state, you'll see it's like we're past the hump. If you remember way back in June or whatever, when it peaked and then it started going down again. I'm not saying it's not going to get bad again at Christmas, but so right now there are no plans. But we have a Board of Health meeting this Thursday night, so obviously we can talk about that. We can add it. It's already on the agenda to discuss COVID anyway, so we can throw that out there.
Mr. Pilling, Selectman Goulart, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you hinting at like doing like you know how the Council on Aging does a flu clinic? Is that what you mean? Once we have, like, would we be doing like a vaccine clinic? Was
well,
that what you meant by that? I thought that's what you meant, and I
the
apologize.
paperwork, when the emergency committee was formed,
Mhm.
I thought we were all given assignments. And I have this floor plan of the middle school with instructions on what I'm to do, and I'm to be in a certain place, and I'm so forth and so on. I've never actually participated in any of the training. I know there was one, which was, I think, might have been last year, but I'm just wondering if we are going to have enough vaccine to immunize the public, or whoever will take the vaccine, prior to that actually happening. Is there any plans to have either a refresher course or a dry run on, okay, let's make believe today's the day, And my thought is when school is closed, maybe this could happen. Just show up at your assigned location and whatever. That's all I'm thinking about. I don't want to get there and be with my directions and my floor plan and not really have a clue what I'm supposed to be doing.
Todd, can I ask a question? Is Selectman Goulart talking about the emergency preparedness plans? Because I know the shelter is at the middle school. They have the cots over there and everything.
Yeah, so I believe what she's referring to is our emergency dispensing site.
Okay, okay.
So when we go to give out a vaccine of any type, there's a drive-through scenario where people are just pulling in their cars and you hand them a bag of pills and off they go. Or we're talking about this thing where we're vaccine. And right now what we're hearing about for COVID is it most likely would be a needle that will have to be administering. But that would still be happening through our emergency dispensing site. Tomorrow we are doing a training. The emergency preparedness, I guess it's not so much the committee, but it's the top tiers of the ICS structure, the incident command structure. And our training tomorrow is about how to dispense a smallpox vaccine to your entire town, because we don't have a COVID vaccine yet. So we're not talking about a COVID vaccine, but we are talking hypothetically if we had to issue a smallpox vaccine to the town. And we're going through a dry run with just the 9 of us on how this is going to happen. We're hoping we'll get some more information about how the vaccine is going to be distributed. Right now, there's issues with the temperature that the vaccine needs to be kept at and that kind of thing, because obviously we don't have refrigerators at the middle school that can go as cold as some of the vaccines are out there now. They are talking about multiple phases for the vaccine, phase 1A, 1B, 1C, and then phase 2, and then the general public. Sounds like the general public won't be until middle of next year. So the intention would be we go through this training tomorrow, we kind of see where the bumps in the road are, and then we would be formulating our plan for an EDS and possibly having a drill to get everybody involved and understand where they're going to be at. If we do roll out an EDS site, what happens is you have to vaccinate the entire town in 24 hours. But the first 12 hours of that is just your setup and training and telling your employees where they need to be and getting them vaccinated in the first 12 hours. So that the second 12 hours is when you're actually giving out the vaccine to the public. So there will be training for all those involved on that hierarchy on what needs to be done. But again, tomorrow the training is for 8 or 9 of us. I think it's 8 of us that are actually doing it, so that we can kind of do a dry run.
Okay, thank you.
Unintended, Todd? No, I'm just kidding. Okay. And I want to just take a moment to thank Mrs. Brady for, I was going to attend a conference for a local rapid response grant that the town may be eligible for to help our business community during the pandemic. Everyone's obviously been crushed by it. And so obviously I cannot attend because I'm attending the infectious disease training tomorrow, and Mrs. Brady offered to attend the grant training that happens at the same time. So I just wanted to thank you for that, Mrs. Brady.
No problem.
Absolutely. Do we have anything else for Mr. Pilling? All right. And I don't think we have anything else on this agenda, right?
No, nothing else.
So I say what we should do, just so everyone is clear, because obviously the Board of Selectmen sets hours and people should not be, in general, people should work whatever hours we set. Do we want to make a vote on this? Because our previous vote is office manager can do up to 40 hours a week as needed, you know, and same for Mr. Pilling for the health agent. So should we take a vote? Because basically what we're saying is, and I have no issue with this because we know contact tracing should be done, but I think we should take a vote on this. And I'm hearing, I have Madam Administrator over here telling me we should take a vote on this. So I think we should vote to authorize them both to work more than 40 hours a week as needed.
Yeah, are we gonna vote then to make it retroactive? Because it sounds like they've worked more than the 40 hours the past week. I'm not sure if it goes beyond that.
We should, because we have, as I told you, we have 8 extra hours that you know, obviously they're going to get paid because they worked for, but we want to make it gel with our vote. So if we could make it retroactive to last week, I think that would be best. Mr. Pilling?
I just want to say that the grant, we did receive it on Tuesday, December 1st. So it was the day after your deadline for getting on the agenda for Wednesday last week.
Yep.
And obviously, after talking to the selectmen Wednesday night, I'm the one that said, hey, we need this time. And we spent Friday doing, well, we had three trainings on Friday, and we did the contract facing. So I took it upon myself to do what I felt necessary to get us over the hurdle that we were at. So, but yes, if it was retroactive to December 1st when we received the grant, that would be appreciated.
Okay, so I'm okay with what Todd just said. However, we gave them each 40 hours. So, Mr. Chairman, you said that they, of course, if they went over, they would get paid. They would not get paid because I'm not talking about the situation right now. I'm okay with going retroactive, blah, blah, blah. But we voted for 40 hours. And if this was a normal situation, not a pandemic, and they worked over, I don't see how they get paid when the board
100%.
said you're working 40 hours. We're extending the hours to 40, not 42, not 45. This is a unique situation. I appreciate the extra work that Todd is doing as well as Roz, but it's not automatic. And I'm okay with going retroactive. I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, they did the work. It's a unique situation.
I totally agree. And full disclosure, I did speak to Mr. Pilling, and I just explained the situation. I understand the bind they're in. I'm picturing they're on a Friday. They have all this stuff coming in. Town hall's closed. We're not there to speak to. So, you know, I get that a decision had to be made. And I explained to Mr. Pilling, we're very sensitive to this because we had a situation just last month where we had to make a decision about an employee who had been working more than what they had been previously authorized to do. So he understands we are in a unique situation. It's not like the situation we dealt with last month that was not related to the pandemic or any type of emergency. So I think we have an understanding, and I think, you know, that it's going to be fine going forward, but we will need the retro vote. Selectman Goulart?
I just want to point out at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, yes, we did vote the hours, but when we finished that vote, we also agreed that we will do whatever is necessary to protect the people of the town of Dighton. And the fact that our health agent, based on what happened and the workload, made that decision, I have no problem with that at all. So I'm going to make a motion that retroactive to December 1st, we allow the health agent, Mr. Pilling, and Mrs. Grassi, the office manager, to work additional hours over and above those we approved at the last November meeting. Karen, you can insert the date for that. Was it the
I believe. Yep.
whatever that date was, in order to deal with the pandemic and to meet the requirements of the grant was just received.
And not to exceed the amount of the grant, I'm assuming.
Yes.
With that addition, I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Before we take a vote, Mr. Pilling, you know, that grant's going to run out quick. We all know that. If these additional hours, if we see cases going up again and things are getting crazy, please come to us well in advance so that we can decide as a board if the hours need to continue beyond 40, knowing that we don't have the grant.
Sure. Well, I said, Roz and I were waiting for our training to come through, and seriously, 3 weeks to get people trained when they're desperate doesn't make any sense. But I will say December 30th, all the CARES and FEMA and theft grants all run out. So.
Yep, absolutely.
What's the date of our first January selectmen's meeting?
The 13th, Selectman Goulart. We may need.
Yeah, I was just thinking we may need a short meeting like this before then. So Mr. Pilling, as you're getting closer to the end of the calendar year, and you're also spending down the grant, once you see that you're going to expend the grant, we're hitting the end of the calendar year, but it looks like the workload or the additional time is still going to require it. If you could let us know before the end of December so that we could have time to post a meeting if we have to the first week in January just to deal with this.
Okay. I can do that.
Absolutely. One other suggestion, if the money dries out faster, We are planning to have some kind of a special meeting on December 21st. I don't know what your timing is like, but if you need to get something on the agenda for then, I'm just letting you know as well.
Okay, I'll put it on my calendar.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. That motion carries. Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I did just want to add to my colleagues, I did have a memo sent out to all department heads, just gently reminding them that you know, people aren't supposed to work hours that have not been approved by the Board of Selectmen. So hopefully that message will trickle down and we'll be, you know, totally fine. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes, Selectman Goulart?
Mr. Pilling, that email that came out from the town accountant that listed grant opportunities that I sent out to different people thinking they may be able to benefit from this. There was mention of COVID-16 money in there. I don't know if any of that would be beneficial to us, the town.
I took a brief look at it. It didn't seem to, but I will read it a little bit deeper. Say the phone kind of keeps ringing with people calling us back for the contact tracing, so it interrupts the train of thought regularly. So.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, you know, I know it's been difficult for our Board of Health office manager and health agent. And it probably feels like a thankless job a lot, but I do want to thank you sincerely for jumping in to the contact tracing. That's certainly not something you were required to do. It's something that you brought to us as knowing that it needed to be done, identifying the gap that it may not get done, and then filling that gap. And so just sincerely, I did want to thank you both for that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't.
You're welcome.
Oh, Dr. Z,
Yep.
just to wrap this up, it is our mutual understanding that the only two employees who have flexibility to work additional hours relative to the COVID-19 pandemic are Mr. Pilling and Mrs. Grassi
Correct?
through the end of the year and within the confines of the grant, correct? That's what we agreed to?
Yep. Absolutely, 100%. And then Mr. Pilling, one last thing. If you could just circle back with the town accountant so we can get the, so he can set up the account for the grant.
Yeah, he's been involved in it. He knew it was coming. I told him that you guys are voting on it now so that he can then set it up. We don't have the final information yet from MAHV because they're waiting to see how many towns are taking them up on the offer before they send out the money release, because we could actually get more money from them if other towns turn down their money. So we'll see. But I am in, yeah, Chris and the Board of Selectmen have both been involved in the emails.
Awesome.
Mrs. Brady, is there still time to get the minutes from this meeting today on our agenda for approval next week?
Sure. Yeah.
Because he's going to need a copy of the actual vote stating that we voted to allow this extra time and about using that grant money. Okay?
Problem.
Yep.
Okay.
And then if we could also send an email to the accounting office with that sort of the same info. Okay?
You could probably use the this grant money for her to write up the minutes to get the minutes done.
Good idea. Now you're thinking. If there's no further discussion, Mr. Pilling, I know you're busy. Thank you for taking time out of your day today. And keep up the good work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hearing no further discussion, I will entertain motions to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. That motion carries. Roll call, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Everyone, thank you so much. Roz, give our regards to Roz. Todd, give our regards to Roz is what I meant to say. Have a good day.
Thank you all very much.
Stay
Okay.
safe.
Yep.